Your uncle said I should marry you to settle the debt he owes me.
How can I marry you when I don't even know you? Let me speak with my uncle first. Uncle, how can you expect me to marry him?
My word is final. You must marry him.
I don't even know who he is.
You must marry him. My word is final.
Searching for a sign.
Glory's early years were painted with hues of love, laughter, and an innocence untouched by the world's cruelty. Her father, a gifted mechanic with grease-streaked hands and a heart of gold, and her mother, a resourceful petty trader who knew every customer by name, built a modest yet joy-filled life in their bustling Nigerian town. They weren't rich by any worldly measure, but their home echoed with laughter, stories, and warmth that wealth could not buy. Their small bungalow, nestled under the shade of an old mango tree, stood as a testament to years of hard work. A reliable old Peugeot sat in the driveway, and a few parcels of land in the nearby village whispered promises of a secure future. For the couple, Glory was their sun and moon, their only child, named in hope and love, their joy made flesh. They raised her with care, filling her ears with stories of dignity, compassion, and the power of education. Evenings in their home were sacred. After dinner, they'd gather in the compound under the velvet sky. Her father would speak of engines and dreams, while her mother recounted tales from the market and parables passed down generations. Glory, eyes wide, would soak in every word, her future glowing like a lantern in her mind. But fate, as cruel as it is unpredictable, struck a vicious blow. On a rainy evening, as they journeyed back from a family celebration in the village, their car skidded on a slick bend. The crash was fatal. Glory's world shattered in a flash of broken glass and twisted metal. At just 10 years old, she was orphaned, alone, and stripped of the only family she'd ever known. Her uncle, Chief Amadi, came forward as her guardian. A prominent man with the swagger of wealth and the pride of ancestral lineage, he was regarded in the community as a pillar of strength and integrity. His name carried weight, his voice turned heads, and his compound stood as a symbol of status. Naturally, it was expected that Glory, now orphaned and vulnerable, would be safe under his roof. The villagers even praised his kindness in taking her in, whispering that Glory was fortunate to land in such a household. But behind the iron gates of his sprawling compound, a different reality unfolded. The warmth people assumed surrounded Glory did not exist. Amanda, Chief Amadi's wife, never hid her resentment. From the moment Glory stepped into their home, she was met not with comfort but with cold indifference and veiled hostility. Amanda's eyes, always calculating, rarely softened in her presence. One night, when she thought Glory was asleep, she whispered to her husband with bitter disdain, "We're feeding her now. Let's put her father's land to use. What do we need an orphan's inheritance for? In Igboland, girls don't inherit anyway." Chief Amadi had not protested. He hadn't even flinched. There was no sign of the protector he presented to the world. Within months, the transformation was swift and final. The parcels of land Glory's father had painstakingly acquired were sold off. The modest family Peugeot, a relic of her past life, was disposed of, and every last trace of her inheritance vanished into thin air. Not a single naira was set aside for her education, her upkeep, or her future. Glory, barely a teenager, began to understand the fragility of promises and the cruelty that could hide behind smiles. Her dreams were packed away, like the photographs of her parents that Amanda had ordered removed from her room. In that house of riches, Glory became invisible, a ghost of a girl surviving on scraps of memory and fading hope. The house that had once been a sanctuary turned into a place of silent bondage. What was meant to be a home became a prison cloaked in marble tiles and ornamental gates. Glory, once the cherished daughter of a proud father, now found herself reduced to a servant. From dawn until nightfall, she scrubbed floors until her palms blistered, washed endless piles of clothes, and cooked elaborate meals she would never be allowed to taste. Amanda barked orders with the cruelty of a warden, and her daughters, Annabel and Jane, mimicked her spite. They would spill juice deliberately, then watch with smug satisfaction as Glory rushed to clean it up. Dirty laundry was flung at her feet as if she were invisible, less than human. At night, while Amanda and her daughters slipped beneath soft duvets in rooms adorned with lace curtains, glowing lamps, and perfumed pillows, Glory curled up on a thin, worn mat by the kitchen door. The scent of spices clung to her skin, mingling with the smoke from the firewood stove. Her sleep was never restful, haunted by hunger and the echoes of laughter from a life now lost. School, once the cornerstone of her dreams, was stripped away with a shrug. Education. For what? Amanda had scoffed. She has everything she needs here. Food and shelter, what more can an orphan ask for? And yet, amid the cruelty, Glory's spirit refused to shatter. She endured, not with loud rebellion, but with quiet resilience. She grew, tall, poised, and graceful. Her eyes, though shadowed by sorrow, held a kind of strength that could not be crushed. She learned to hide her tears, to smile through the pain, and to whisper her prayers to the stars, believing that somehow, someday, she would be free. Years later, as Glory came of age, her days remained marked by routine and quiet endurance. One fateful afternoon, as Glory made her way back from the stream, a heavy 20-liter container of water balanced expertly on her head, the sun beat down on her slender frame. Her steps were steady, though her legs ached from the long walk. Just as she neared the edge of the village road, a sleek black car, a rare sight in that part of town, slowed beside her. The tinted window rolled down smoothly. "Hello, beautiful," came a smooth, confident voice. A young man, smartly dressed in a crisp white shirt and designer sunglasses, offered her a charming smile. "I've seen you around. You work so hard. May we be friends?" Glory blinked, surprised. She rarely drew kind attention, especially from strangers. She didn't respond at first, unsure of what to make of him. But he didn't press. He simply nodded and drove off, leaving behind a trail of curiosity in her heart. His name, she later learned, was Stanley, the only son of a wealthy businessman who had recently returned from overseas. Unlike others of his class, Stanley carried no arrogance. He visited often, always looking for a reason to speak to her. Sometimes he brought gifts, books tied with ribbon, juicy fruits from his father's orchard. Other times, he simply stood nearby and talked with gentle sincerity. At first, Glory kept her distance. Years of mistreatment had made trust difficult. But Stanley's quiet persistence softened her edges. And for the first time in years, she found herself laughing freely. Their friendship blossomed, slowly, beautifully, into something tender, something full of promise. But not everyone was pleased with the budding romance. Chief Amadi, ever watchful and calculating, noticed the growing bond between Glory and Stanley and felt threatened by it. To him, Glory was just a burden, an orphan girl who lived under his roof and owed him her silence. The idea that she, of all people, might marry into wealth and influence while his own daughters remained single stirred a deep resentment in him. One humid evening, Chief Amadi sat with Amanda in the compound, sipping palm wine under the dim light of a hanging bulb. His voice was low but firm. "We cannot sit here and watch that girl marry a rich man like Stanley while our daughters are still waiting for suitors," he said. Amanda nodded sharply. "She's already getting too comfortable. It has to end." Together, they began to plot. Their plan was subtle, manipulative, and cruel. A few days later, Chief Amadi invited Stanley for a private conversation. He welcomed the young man with practiced warmth, offered him a drink, then leaned in as if sharing a painful secret. You're a fine young man, Amadi began, his tone serious. But I must warn you. Glory has episodes. Mental ones. Since childhood. We've tried everything. Prayers, medicines, but nothing worked. Stanley was stunned. She's never shown anything like that. She seems perfectly fine to me. Amadi sighed heavily, shaking his head. It's unpredictable. It comes and goes. You're young, smart. You need a stable partner. My daughters. Annabelle especially. She's everything a man could want. Educated. Beautiful. From a good home. Stanley left that evening with a mind clouded by doubt. The seeds of suspicion had been planted, and though his heart resisted, his trust began to wither. Slowly, and then all at once, he distanced himself from Glory. Days later, the news spread through the village like wildfire. Stanley was engaged to Annabelle. Weeks after, they were married. Glory was crushed. She said nothing. Her heart ached, but years of suffering had taught her silence. She wept in secret, then returned to her chores as if nothing had changed. Time, as it does, moved on. Seasons shifted, crops were planted and harvested, and life in the village carried its rhythm of struggle and survival. Amid this quiet passage of time, a farmer named Obiora continued his tireless work on Chief Amadi's lands. He was a humble man, strong, weathered by years of toil, and known for his honesty. For several months, he had labored without pay, trusting Amadi's promises. But eventually, frustration overtook patience, and Obiora approached the chief to demand what was rightfully his. "I've no cash," Amadi said dismissively, barely looking up. "But I'll give you something better, Glory." Obiora blinked in disbelief. "Sir. She's a good girl. Hardworking. Quiet. What more do you want in a wife?" The suggestion was jarring, almost surreal. But in the days that followed, Obiora found himself observing Glory more closely. He saw how she moved with grace even under the weight of suffering, how she spoke little but worked with devotion. Slowly, the idea took root. He reasoned that she would make a good wife, faithful, industrious, gentle. And so, he approached her.
Your uncle said I should marry you to settle the debt he owes me.
How can I marry you when I don't even know you? Let me speak with my uncle first. Uncle, how can you expect me to marry him?
My word is final. You must marry him.
I don't even know who he is.
The matter was settled without her consent. The ceremony was brief, joyless, and almost secretive. There were no drums, no dancing, no celebration. Glory was sent off with a single worn bag of clothes and the last thread of her dignity. She arrived at Obiora's hut, a small, weather-beaten home surrounded by stretches of farmland, and crossed the threshold into a life she never asked for. Back at the compound, Chief Amadi, Amanda, and Jane rejoiced. "Let her marry a poor man," Amanda sneered. "With the kind of poor man she ended up with, she won't be able to raise her head, let alone ask for her father's land," Amadi said with a satisfied grin. To her surprise, Obiora was gentle. Despite the strange and abrupt way their union had begun, he made no demands of her. He gave her space to breathe, allowed her time to settle, and treated her with a quiet, steady respect. In the mornings, he rose early and left for the farm, returning with fresh yams or cassava. He never raised his voice, never called her names. When she cooked, he thanked her. When she was silent, he gave her room. Slowly, Glory's guard began to lower. Days turned into weeks. Obiora showed her how to plant vegetables, how to recognize signs of rain in the wind, and how to care for the soil. He listened when she spoke, even when her words came in cautious fragments. In time, Glory began to feel something unfamiliar, peace. One bright morning, Obiora returned from the fields with a twinkle in his eye. "It's time to visit my village," he said, brushing dust from his trousers. There are things you must see. They packed modestly, wrapping their few belongings in old cloths. Together, they boarded a chartered vehicle and journeyed through winding village roads and dense green forests. The scenery shifted as they neared their destination. At the edge of a grand town, a large palace emerged, majestic and gleaming under the sun. Glory's eyes widened. "This is a royal mansion," she said. "What are we doing here?" Obiora smiled. "There is a tradition in my village. Anyone who leaves and returns with a visitor must pay homage to the palace before going home." As they entered, guards bowed low. The beat of traditional drums echoed. Women danced, ululated, and threw flowers in their path. Inside the richly adorned palace hall, a regal man in flowing robes awaited them. Glory's heart pounded. What is happening? Is this real? Then, the king rose. His voice boomed with pride. "Behold my son," he announced. "He has found his queen." Glory stood frozen. Obiora turned to her, his eyes kind. "I am Prince Obiora," he said softly. "I left the palace to find a woman of strength and virtue, not one drawn to wealth or titles. And I found you." Tears welled in Glory's eyes. In that moment, the years of pain, betrayal, and humiliation melted into something new, something pure. Hope. Real, lasting hope. Obiora made good on his promise. Once they settled into the palace, he ensured Glory returned to school, enrolling her in an elite institution where she pursued her education with renewed passion. He also arranged for her to receive business training, knowing she had the discipline and intelligence to thrive. Surrounded by mentors and resources, Glory soon discovered a talent for entrepreneurship, launching a small enterprise that grew steadily under her careful guidance. She lived in comfort and security, her days filled with purpose and dignity. Though royalty now, she never let the crown cloud her heart. The palace was her home, but humility remained her adornment. Meanwhile, back in the city, the tide was turning for those who had once mocked her. Stanley and Annabelle, basking in material wealth, sat in their luxurious sitting room laughing over wine when a loud knock thundered at the main entrance. "Honey, let me check the door," Stanley said, setting down his glass. He opened the door to find 3 stern-faced men in uniform. "Are you Stanley Hume?" one asked. "Yes," Stanley replied, confused. "You are under arrest for drug trafficking and kidnapping," the officer said, flashing his badge. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law." Before Stanley could respond, he was handcuffed. Annabelle rushed out, her face pale with shock, but she could do nothing as her husband was led away. The scandal broke fast and wide. Stanley was sentenced to years in prison. Annabelle, disgraced and abandoned, became a shadow of the proud woman she once was. Friends turned away. The society she once flaunted now saw her as a stain. In the wake of the investigation, more truth surfaced. Chief Amadi and Amanda's decades of deceit unraveled, fraud, child abuse, and property theft all exposed. The law descended swiftly. Their properties were seized, bank accounts frozen, and their once feared name reduced to ridicule. From comfort, they fell into poverty, living in the shadows of their former glory. Meanwhile, Glory, now Princess Glory, remained graceful in her triumph. She returned to her old neighborhood only once. Dressed simply, without the regalia of her title, she made her way to the small, forgotten graveyard where her parents rested. She knelt before their graves, placed fresh flowers, and whispered, "From ashes, you raised me to grace." As the wind stirred the trees and rustled the leaves above her, it felt like a gentle answer, soft, celestial, and full of peace.
Thank you for watching. Tell us your opinion in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel Chukwudi Lawler Studio at Chukwudi Lawler.
Soft does most days.
Like and subscribe.